A new study has found that red light therapy for Parkinson's disease appears to reduce symptoms and improve the gut microbiome. These findings offer a ray of hope for the approximately 80,000 Australians and more than 10 million people worldwide who are facing a long, slow decline from a progressive neurodegenerative disease for which there is no cure and treatment options are limited. The number of Parkinson's sufferers is only expected to increase with the world's ageing population and, chillingly, the recently hypothesised link between contracting COVID-19 and an increased risk of Parkinson's disease. To discuss the significance of the study's findings, we're privileged to have Professor of Medicine at the University of New South Wales, Dr. Hosen Kiat, who oversaw the trial, join us today. Thank you so much for taking the time.
No worries. So, yeah, Suvi, this is not very new. I think there has been an understanding how important microbiome will be in knowing more about our closest neighbors, which outnumber us by up to 100 to 1 in some estimates, at least 4 or 5 to 1. Minimum, if not more, in terms of the number of trillions of cells. So if we say that, human bodies will have 30, 40 trillion cells, minimum is they'll have hundreds of trillion cells of microbiome residing in our body, okay? And the majority of that are on our skin and lining our guts. So it's really stands to reason that they must play a big role. It's not possible for such an important symbiotic neighbor to keep living with us for millennia without playing a role in our well-being. Not possible. If you look at all these animals that symbiotically live together, they all play the same thing. They help each other.
Yes.
And so we have come to that understanding probably over the last decade. So there's been a lot of studies homing into where and how microbiome play a role in our health. Now, as a physician in cardiovascular disease, we always know that this gut-heart or heart-gut axis exists. There's been a lot of studies on this. In fact, probably even 5, 6, 7 years ago, the Israeli group did a fantastic study. They just shined some lights on the bone marrow of the pigs, on the tibia. Tibia is one of the leg bones, and on the pelvis, okay? Yeah. They just light this in pigs, in pigs, which were given a heart attack, basically. Okay, and of course, the pigs that got this light shone on their bone marrow to stimulate the bone marrow to produce stem cells and other rescue chemicals. Yeah. Those pigs, if you can even imagine, just try to think how much less the size of the heart attack compared to those pigs that didn't get the light shone for half an hour before the heart attack. How much do you think it makes a difference? By how? What do you think? The size of the heart attack.
Maybe. Well, any reduction would be a miracle, but I guess 10% reduction.
Yeah. Okay. In fact, it is 68% reduction in the size of heart attack. Yeah.
I didn't know about that study.
It's amazing. Yeah. So now this is not shining the light to the heart. This is just shining the light to the pelvic bone and the tibia. And so even in that era, we already knew that there is this gut-brain axis, because the remoteness makes it absolutely possible for anything from the gut to talk to the brain. Because obviously the heart, to the heart, to the brain or the heart, but we're just talking about the heart. So this is what happens, that the gut essentially, so what happened is, after that experiment, another experiment was done, this time on rats, to show that the size of this heart attack is reduced, in part because the heart cells, RNA and DNA, are modified by shining lights on these microbiomes. So it's all these little experiments, but gradually built up to our understanding that yes, microbiome plays a role, and light can improve that role playing. So it applies to the other organs as well, and the gut-brain axis and the gut-heart axis can also be through a nerve called the vagus nerve. Yeah. The vagus nerve comes from the brain and supplies the heart and supplies the gut. And so the gut-heart and gut-brain axis can also be directly through nerve conduction signals or chemicals going through the nerves between the brain and these organs. And so, yeah, so there's a lot of these little things that make me feel that I want to learn a lot more about the microbiome, and the laser is such a non-invasive tool that we just thought, okay, we will try if laser does anything to microbiome. And so we started doing some of these experiments ourselves. And our first experiment was basically the one that was published in 2018 that showed that in obese mice, we have been able to increase the bacteria called Akkermansia. So Akkermansia is well-studied bacteria in the guts that cause weight loss, basically. Oh, wow. Yeah, so that was published in 2018. And yeah, so after that we said that, look, let's do more research in looking at the gut-brain axis, and that's how the neurodegenerative disease research studies were planned, basically. And so we have done, as you know, on Parkinson's now, and that's because we got a grant from Parkinson South Australia, and then very soon we'll also start doing it in people with cognitive dysfunction or early Alzheimer's disease. Yeah.
Yeah. That's absolutely fascinating. Like, what sort of mechanism do you think is, how do you think the light is altering the gut microbiome? How is this possible?
Well, locally, for example, if we shine lights to any cells, they can trigger local reaction, such as we know that, for example, when we shine lights to the brain cells, in fact, the brain cells mitochondria content will be increased, so that provides more energy, and so that's one thing. And also they will produce certain chemicals that will, in the sense that maybe it is possible that this production of certain chemicals in the cells upon being shown upon them may be some sort of defensive mechanism, so that they produce some phytochemicals in the cells which are actually anti-inflammatory. And that's why we know that these lights shining to any cell locally can produce this sort of cellular response to increase the mitochondria, thus increasing energy so that the cells can function better, as well as the anti-inflammatory reaction in the cells. Now, remotely, it is very, very likely that it has got some sort of chemical reaction that, for example, the stem cell production by shining into the bone, and that will help organs in need of these stem cells. And that's another one. And certain production of good bacteria by the shining on the abdomen will reduce, for example, certain chemicals. One of them that we know is called TMAO, which is trimethyl amine oxide, TMAO, and that's a very bad chemical that the gut bacteria produce, and that seemed to be reduced by the laser shining on the abdomen. Now, that reduction in that chemical has been shown to, that chemical, basically TMAO, has been shown to increase the risk of heart attacks, cholesterol plaques forming in the blood vessels, cancer production, and cognitive dysfunction, because it is a very inflammatory molecule. So reducing that also will be one of the mechanisms.
It's absolutely incredible. What I'm really curious about, though, is that if the light does increase the health of individual cells, which, like you explained, it does, what about the bacteria that we don't want in the gut, though? Like, how come they decreased? Because the light seems to have increased the ones we want and decreased the ones we don't want.
Yeah, well, I guess it is survival of the fittest. If you increase the energetics of good bacteria by, I guess, what do you call it, by selection process over evolution, the good bacteria will be more likely to be preserved for the sake of long-term survival of the beings. So if the good bacteria are given more energetics and the numbers start to increase, there's always that competitiveness of occupying a certain space. So the ratio between the good bacteria and the bad bacteria is called F2B ratio. Is a ratio between the good bacteria and the bad bacteria will be shifted then. Because as the good bacteria number increases, the bad bacteria will reduce, just because there's only certain space and certain number of foods, certain amount of foods that you can consume that's available for consumption. So it is, I think, by the default of increasing good bacteria, and the bad bacteria is reduced.
That's really incredible. I find it really exciting. Yeah. Do you think, well, when it comes to the Parkinson's symptoms themselves, do you think, because the participants in the trial, their Parkinson's symptoms appeared to have reduced, do you think that's mainly due to shining the light on the brain or on the gut microbiome, or even possibly a placebo effect, or a combination of everything? What do you think?
Yeah, the Hosen's effect or the placebo effect, almost always there's some component. In our paper, it will be shown that we have taken that into account. And certainly there is absolutely no doubt that there is a small amount of that placebo effect that we could discount, essentially. The local effect, my feeling, is quite important because, as I said, that we have shown that brain cells ATP, mitochondrial energy content, increases by local reaction to shining, say, using a helmet. And therefore, that surely helps the cellular energetics of brain cells, and that will help the synaptic communication ability between brain cells. And that's what Parkinson's disease patients start losing as they, when their mobility and agility decreases, because the brain cells don't talk to each other as well, essentially. They become more and more sluggish. And in terms of remote effect, there must be multiple remote effects, either through direct relationship between abdominal microbiome composition changing and have that direct vagus nerve translating the effects through the gut brain axis, or through blood circulation, lymphatic circulation, changing chemical hormonal components. So my feeling is it's pleiotropic. It's due to multiple reasons. We still haven't worked out whether if it is helmet alone versus abdominal shining alone, or versus even remote shining on the ankles, on whatever, on the fingers. All these things obviously need further studies, but there's no doubt that that combination of abdominal laser application and the helmet application, or the brain application of the laser, resulted in very significant improvement in the symptoms of Parkinson's disease. Yeah.
Oh, it's very exciting. It really, really is exciting. And I was back to the gut microbiome. I had a question about that. What do you think about changing your gut microbiome with diet, with probiotics? There's limits to what you can do through those, isn't there? Like, taking the kimchi or the fermented sauerkraut. How much effect do you think, or taking yogurt, how much of an effect does that have?
Yeah, again, no doubt about the research that, so what happens here is that good bacteria really thrive with, basically they need these, what we call short chain fatty acids, okay? And they produce it, they consume it, but our body also needs the short chain fatty acid, which is SCFA. So the more short chain fatty acids are produced, the more our gut lining will be healthy, lined with mucus. The cellular integrity of the gut lining will be better. And of course, our anti-inflammation ability will be better through this SCFA, or short chain fatty acid. Now, there are two ways of doing this. One is the bacteria chewing on the fiber. It's called saccharolysis, and they will produce short chain fatty acids, or they digest, and that's through fermentation, of course, or because bacteria residing on food, just fermenting, basically. Or the protein that we eat that go to the gut can also be called proteolysis. They also can be turned into making short chain fatty acids. But there's a main difference here. When you digest protein, you also produce bad chemicals like TMAO. But when you digest fiber, there's none of those. So in an ideal world, you don't want to feed too much red meat, etc., into your bowels so that they have less protein to digest. And therefore, we want the SCFA, the short chain fatty acid, be produced just mainly by high fiber that cannot be absorbed, and therefore they get dumped into our bowels, and therefore they get fermented, and therefore the good fatty acids are produced, okay? And that's the reason why there's no doubt that if we make our guts healthy by probiotics, prebiotics, and therefore a lot of SCFA are produced, then we'll be healthier.
Yeah.
There are chemicals that we have shown, such as metformin is one of the diabetic medications, Acarbase, another diabetic medication, which have been shown to also stimulate production of this SCFA in the guts.
Oh.
And therefore, in fact, they have been shown to be associated with weight loss. Okay, and so if you were to say, hey, what is the next step for people like us who really believe in laser, infrared, near-infrared energy to help as a non-invasive tool in health span. That is like what you probably initially indicated. Well, there's already a few other things, but they have limitations. Yeah, they do. But how about if we add laser to those, whether then that limitation is further overcome by the synergistic effect of, say, specific diet, specific medication, plus laser, whether the effect will be not 1 + 1 = 2, but 1 + 1 = 4, which is what we call complementary effect. And a lot of the time when, for example, we use 2 medications to treat high blood pressure, if we just use one of that medication, then you drop it by 5, from 120 to 115. When you use the other one, it will also be dropping it by 5, from 115 to 110, from 120 to 115. But when we add those 2 together, the blood pressure dropped by 30. Okay, so it's called synergistic effect. So a lot of things happen that way. And we also believe that it is quite possible that laser would provide a synergistic effect to the currently available therapeutic maneuvers. And therefore, it is a very exciting direction for us, in the sense that it's a no-brainer help if it is useful, because it is relatively cheap, it's non-invasive, it has 0 side effect. You know, it's like, you know, like when we use placebo laser, you don't even know, because it's you know, you don't feel anything. You know, so it's like no side effects. So it's so easy to use a placebo-controlled trial with laser, because the patient doesn't feel anything, it's so side effectless that it's a no-brainer treatment modality.
Oh, absolutely.
And it is one of the cheapest. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so true. And it's so easy to administer, and yeah, totally natural. And
correct. And it doesn't need high skill to administer. Correct. It's not like an X-ray, you know, like you don't have to have a degree to, like any, like we can train nursing staff, we can train anyone to just administer. We can train the daughter of the patient. And in fact, that's what happened a lot. In nursing home patients and so on. The relative will just come and apply laser for 20 minutes for the back pain of their great-grandmother, for example. And so portable. So it is a very, you know, I have a colleague, a professor, a retired professor of cardiac surgery. He would fly everywhere, and he goes to London a lot, long flights, and he would carry that laser stick with him for his chronic back pain. You know, he's a retired, revered retired cardiac surgeon, and so he doesn't operate anymore, but he is now in administration and so on. And yeah, so it's such an easy thing, and you can apply it yourself, of course.
Yeah, so like you were explaining, it's another tool in our arsenal to combat these chronic diseases and what we're facing.
And it's such an easy tool to add on, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah, well, because if we add on another drug, there could be more side effects. So if we add on laser to a drug, then we know that we are not adding, there's no potential adding of side effects.
Well, speaking of chronic diseases that the world's facing, obesity. What do you think this could have implications for the obesity epidemic?
Yeah. Again, my feeling is the exciting thing will be to see how much synergy or synergistic action laser will have on the established anti-obesity maneuvers, including diet, including probiotics, which have been shown to cause weight loss, and medications, of course. And then you know, for example, now there is a very, very good medicine. Again, it is a diabetic medication. It's an injectable diabetic medication that you can give to to non-diabetics just for weight loss purposes. And it's quite good, but just imagine instead of losing 16 pounds or 8 to 10 kilos, and then you apply 20 minutes of laser every day for 3 to 4 weeks or something to that nature. And if you have synergistic action, that's, that means that it's not 1 + 1 = 2. That means that it's 1 + 1 = 4. The patient can lose 40 kilo instead of 10 kilo. And that will be fantastic, for example. That is the sort of thing that I'm very looking forward to, in the sense that look at multi-pronged approach to deal with something very difficult otherwise, because no one modality is going to make a 120 kilo person 80 kilo.
Yeah.
No drug can do that, okay? But if there are synergistic ways of a few things you use, including, of course, lifestyle, better sleep, better exercise, etc., and if they all add even 1.5 instead of 1 additional benefit, then you probably don't need surgery.
Yeah.
Then you probably can get 120 kilo to 80 kilo, 80 kilo to 58 kilo.
Yeah.
So I think that's the way that we should look at, is that there should be a collaborative effort of multidisciplines who use different methods, non-invasively, and that can be, in a sense, reapplied whenever necessary, without fear of like surgery. You can't sort of like, okay, let's just do another one, so, but this, like if your weight gradually comes back, doesn't prevent anyone to redo another regime or regimen of another, say, 3 months of this. It's perfectly doable.
It does. So, yeah. Sorry, I'm glad you mentioned the redoing, because I've spoken to some of the trial participants, like Ron Till, and one of the main benefits he actually experienced through the trial was he got his sleep back. He was sleeping very poorly before the trial, and interestingly, when he stops using the laser, like when he gets lazy or he forgets, his sleep, he says, it goes downhill quickly, but then when he starts to reuse it again, it comes back to that. So it sounds like, do you think it's an ongoing therapy that you should use, especially if you've got Parkinson's?
No, we don't know the answer really. Say you're an asthmatic, yes, for sure. Like if you're an asthmatic, control on medication, and if you stop your medication, sure, your asthma may come back, but it may not. If certain things in your life change, for example, say that you're living in this house with certain burden of allergens, but then because you're taking puffers, so your asthma is controlled. But then if you stop taking it in a week, you start wheezing again. But hey, who knows that if you move into another place with 0 allergen burden, maybe you can get away for 6 months instead of a week without medications. So we don't know yet whether a certain treatment, and the same thing with diabetic medications. How many people have to inject themselves with insulin, and then when they lose 30 kilograms, they don't need to inject insulin at all. Okay, so so for now, until now, we can see that the way we use our laser seems that there is a time associated effects, but we may be using other form of lasers or other way to apply lasers that eventually, after a certain amount of time, they will have a remission. They could have remission of years or months. That's the sort of exciting area that we always will want to explore. Because of the pluralistic nature of this mechanism of actions, we really don't know which mechanism of action will be a lot more durable than the other. My feeling is that the local effect will not be durable,
Mhm.
but the remote effects may be more durable.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
So, for example, if it is 50% due to dysbiosis, which is microbiome going into chaos,
yeah.
if that condition is 50% reliant on healthy microbiome, by fixing microbiome, you may be okay for months and years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it really depends on. We know that very few disease has a magic bullet treatment.
Yeah.
Very, very few.
Yeah.
Very few. Because most diseases happen due to a few things, unfortunately, happening in one body, and then bang, it becomes a disease. Okay. And so, heart disease, cholesterol plaques forming in the blood vessel. There's no way that we will one day say, oh, there's one thing only that if you do one thing, there's no way that it will happen, because the process happens because of inflammation, because of LDL, because of adrenaline. All these things happen together, somehow create the opportunity for plaques to form. We have people with LDL of huge amount of bad cholesterol, like I had a patient with LDL of 9, and at the age of 61, she had tiny, tiny plaques. Okay, LDL is the substrate for plaque forming.
Oh,
So usually your LDL is about 2 to 3, and hers is 9, and she's 60. So she has got plenty of time to build plaques, and she has hardly any plaques. So there cannot be one thing, it has to be a few things together. And therefore, the treatment, the best treatment ultimately for health span has to be also pluralistic. It has to be, and therefore lifestyle. There's no one thing, is it, in lifestyle? Lifestyle is a set of things. You cannot say I have a healthy lifestyle if you just sleep 8 hours a day and do nothing else. So yeah, okay. So you can't say I have a good lifestyle if you just smile. No. A good, so so people who always come to a doctor's clinic and just say, just give me the pill, that's never going to be never going to lead to good health, put it that way.
Yeah.
And therefore, I also don't believe that there is going to be one drug for Parkinson's, one thing for cancer. It will be always this like a synergistic, multi-pronged approach. And that's the reason why I share with you, that is our vision, is that laser will share with other platforms of treatments to see if it can lend a hand, but lend a hand in a synergistic manner. So it is 1 + 1 = 5, 1 + 1 = 10, instead of 1 + 1 = 2. Yeah. And the way we apply laser, where, how long, which wavelength, LED versus laser, etc. And that's the exciting part, is to work out what is the right way for different conditions.
Well, I was going to ask you that if you're a Parkinson's patient now, we know from previous articles that we've published and from the emerging research, we know that there are thousands now, I think, of Parkinson's patients who are using red light therapy, and many have reported positive benefits. What would be the best advice for a Parkinson's patient listening to this or reading the article? What sort of device or protocol, or what would you recommend someone to be doing to try and help themselves until we get more information?
Yeah, so yes, it is. When our paper is published, it will remain a preliminary research.
Yeah,
I don't want to at all oversell any technology in its infancy.
yeah,
But as you alluded, our trial, when it is published, you'll see that majority of Parkinson patients who were subject to the laser treatment showed dramatic improvement in symptoms, significant improvements in their writing, in the sense of smell, in their get up and go, in the speed of walking, all these things, consistently so. So it's not like one person got 1,000% improvement and then 8 people have none. It seems that everyone have some improvement in different things or most things. And therefore, I would say, if they use the laser we use, if they use the protocol we use in the study, I would expect they'll replicate the results that we have. So I would say when our paper is published, if I were a Parkinson's patient, I would want to read it. I would seek out the laser. I would use the same protocol as it is described. And if I've got a question, I would call the authors and I would discuss it with them. And that's what I'm going to do if I were a Parkinson's patient. Because it is inexpensive, it is readily available, and again, I underline that 1,000 times, it is one of the very few things in Parkinson's disease treatment that has no side effects. Very few.
I know.
I see so many Parkinson's patients because I am, as a cardiologist, of course, I see the age group that Parkinson's occur. And it is very sad. Compared to cardiac medications, these Parkinson's medications are absolutely awful. I know. So, and that's why I feel that if I were them, I will give it a go, given the results of the paper.
Because I will put the protocol at the end of this video or below this video. I'll put links to the actual devices that were used in the trial, so for people that want to replicate the exact devices. But we also know that there's people using the homemade helmets that are getting benefit from that, and other handheld devices. So, but it does seem to.
So we believe in the helmet as a local effect transmitter, and that's the reason why our lead author, Dr. Anne Liebert, has been vigorously redesigning a lot more practical helmet that hopefully you'll be talking to us again in a few months when the new helmet is launched. So,
absolutely.
I told
Anne apparently a review of it.
Apparently I haven't seen the latest prototype, but Anne convinced me that it is a lot better looking than when I first saw it. So, because I said it should only not work, but it should also be aesthetically useful, that if they want to go out shopping, they can just put a hat on it. And people will say, wow, it looks good. And so anyway, it might not be as good as that, but hopefully it is a lot better looking than the first prototype that I saw late last year. But we have got a fantastic group of engineers which have been working with Anne to develop this revised sort of version 2 so-called helmet.
That would be a good way to spread the word about it if someone went shopping with it.
Well, there you are. So it should be multicolored, and maybe that's the way you do it. So but I'll leave that to the expert designers and engineers that Anne work with. So it's a very exciting era, I think, in terms of the laser. Laser has had a long history and has had more than abundance amount of basic science research productivity, but it is only of late that it's been used by clinicians to take it from more like basic science to translational into clinical application.
Well,
so I think.
Sorry. What's the future then in terms of this, the research? Are you planning a larger randomized controlled trial? Is that coming up?
Correct. Yeah. So with the new helmet for sure, that we already have, as I alluded, that we will be testing on people with early cognitive dysfunction or early dementia, mainly Alzheimer's type of dementia. That is already one of the protocols that we have signed on, that the funding has been secured. And then we definitely, and is at the moment doing more trials on Parkinson's patients to enlarge the patient population. But my feeling is the future trials, as I said, will be looking at how laser can be better applied in terms of comparing. Is it better applying on your legs, on your tummy? Is it mainly all through microbiomes, or is it always better to use local and microbiome application? Those sort of teasing out what is the best combination, or, how much better if you use two sites versus one site. All these things will make a lot of difference to patients, because ultimately you want the easiest and most effective protocol. That's one part. And the second part, as I said before, so important, is that we need to look at how we can apply laser as a treatment in addition to other platforms of either pharmacotherapy, device therapy, lifestyle therapy, because to me, it is one of the most, the easiest additional treatment to any existing treatment. It's so easy to add on, in the sense. Okay,
it is.
Because you can just say to anyone that's on specific treatment or set of treatments, you add this on for 20 minutes a day. You don't even have to talk about the side effects to the patients. Like, every time I prescribe a drug, I have to spend 10 minutes to discuss the potential side effects. Yeah. So this one you don't even have to, like the stick cannot even be strong enough to hit someone. And so, so it's so benign. You can just say, look, here, I lend it to you for 3 months. Use it for 20 minutes. Shine it on your legs or whatever. Yeah. And it's such a no-brainer addition to what is already got some mileage in the treatment of that condition, to look at the amount of synergy, in a sense, or complementary action.
Yeah.
And to me, that is the biggest thing that laser could offer, and befriend. In the sense that there's so many different platforms for different diseases, in cardiovascular disease and neurodegenerative disease, autoimmune disease. And my feeling is laser will turn out to be very, very important eventually in autoimmune disease. We published a paper on COVID, for example, with laser. And when we look at mechanistically, there is absolutely fantastic future for laser in immunity, or modulation of immunity. And therefore, our COVID paper was accepted almost immediately when we wrote that. And I think it was published in Aging and Disease, which is one of the peer-reviewed medical journals for geriatrics. Yeah. So, and therefore, yeah. So I see a huge future of now reaping the fruits of the basic science research of laser of the last 50 years into the clinical application of the instrument.
Yeah, and just with the gut microbiome too. Like, do you think there's any disease that isn't affected in some way by the microbiome? Like, do you think the microbiome pretty much affects almost all diseases, or what would be the main?
Correct.
You think?
Yeah. I truly believe that the main research one of the largest group of research in the next 20 years would be exploiting the connection of microbiome to disease. And I'm almost certain almost every disease in a way or two or more will be adversely affected, either adversely affected, or if the correction is done, profit from the correction of the dysbiosis or chaotic, improperly populated guts by bad bacteria. Yeah, the so-called F&B ratio. So this is the good and bad bacteria ratio. Yeah. So my feeling is it's about time that we get to know our neighbors very well. Yeah. Which have coexisted with us for a few billion years, maybe. Yeah. And so it's amazing that it just come to fore in the last 100 years or so, 50, 20, 30 years, in the sense that previous medicine has not been putting a lot of focus in this, but now it is beyond a shadow of doubt. Every subspecialty is interested. Yeah.
Very fascinating. And I really take my hat off to you as the researchers, and because this finding that infrared light can improve the gut microbiome is a world first. You're the first people to show this.
Yeah, and the good thing is there's so much we don't know, and therefore there's still a lot to do, and that's great. And we're kept occupied, and and that's the thing, we use so many drugs that we don't really know why they work, but they work and they're safe, so we use them. Oh. And there's just so many that we do like that. Yeah.
I didn't realize that, actually. That there are drugs that we're using that we don't know how.
There are many pharmacotherapies that we use. If you read what is the mechanism of action, it will say we're not sure what the mechanism of action is. Probably it is through this and this and this and this. And one of the largest ones we have been studying extensively over the last 20 years, again, is a diabetic medication. All of a sudden we find out that it is one of the best cardiac medications, and then one of the best renal protective medications. And this group of medications is called SGLT2 receptor inhibitor. Is a medication that blocks a receptor in the kidney, but as it turns out, not only it is good in making blood sugar better, but in fact it is one of the best drugs for heart failure. And so it took us years and years and years to find out what are the possible mechanisms, because we have been using it for diabetes, but all of a sudden we found out, wow, people with heart failure taking this drug really got better. But we don't know why, but we use it, and so that our patients can get better. But it took us a lot of, but even now, not all the mechanisms have been worked out, but at least gradually we find out, why does it help heart? So a lot of things, as long as they don't have adverse effects and they are helping people, we'll use them. FDA will approve them. And so, like one of these diabetic injectable medications that has been approved purely for weight loss by FDA, so that you don't have to be diabetic for doctors in America to prescribe this medication. Not all the mechanisms have been worked out, but they seem to drop the weight of patients quite well. So that's how it is.
That's genuinely fascinating. Yeah. I just very quickly, something popped into my head. Depression. I wonder if gut microbiome affects, because SSRIs, the group of drugs that help with serotonin uptake Is that from the gut, or is there some mechanism there? I wonder if that could even.
Yeah, there's correct. So absolutely, anything that happens in the brain, we can almost assume it will have some component of gut-brain axis in operation. And it's the same thing with the depression as well. There's been quite a few papers looking at improving microbiome and resolution of depression. Yeah.
Because that would be
so
because mental health is such a massive thing.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. Mental health is definitely like the orphan of medicine. It's often neglected in terms of grant funding, and often people like me say, "Oh, it's too hard," so we just don't know enough, etc. But more and more, we are embracing it. We are thinking that there may be a common pathway between physical illness and mental illness, and microbiome is, as you indicated, going to play a role, and almost certainly a major role. Yeah.
Wow.
Because obesity is sort of like a lot to do, in a lot of cases, mental health.
Yeah.
And certainly obesity is very, very well modulated through microbiome health. And therefore, I would imagine very easily this research on mental health and gut-brain axis will flourish. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your work. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your efforts on behalf of all these patients that are benefiting from your research. And thank you for talking to us so that we can help tell it to other people.
Yeah, and I do want to probably my last comment is to congratulate my team. I think it's our team really. Dr. Brian Bicknell, as you know, is the microbiologist in our team, and without him, we are no microbiologists. So he has done the hard yard with all this microbiome work and the SCUTS work and the data analysis and so on. So he is an absolute gem, and he will be in this cognitive dysfunction helmet trial and learning about the microbiome effect as well. So and of course our leader and Dr. Anne Liebert. Without her, I wouldn't know about laser. So,
Yes, all of you. It's a privilege to work with all of you. Congratulations to
no
you.
worries. You have a good late afternoon. Is that evening, or is it same time as us?
Well, it's not even that late. It's only 5:30 here, but we
okay,
sun, I guess
right.
it's really early here in Queensland, I guess, and it's very cloudy outside at the moment. So it looks dark, doesn't it? Yeah, it's dark.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, you have a good evening as well. And
thank you.
Thank you for your time.
We'll talk soon.
Yeah, I really appreciate you.
No worries. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.